Greg joins us now. Greg, did you look at the Johnny Manziel tape from the Tennessee game?
I did look at the Johnny Manziel tape.
And?
Oh, I thought it was very uneven. I thought he made a couple of good throws and did a couple of good things, but I would probably say, if you had to give him a grade, I would say there was probably more negative than positive.
I agree with what the Browns are doing in sitting him down, because if Josh McCown doesn't get hurt, Manziel's not playing, I think they're just trying to make him get into a routine to understand that this is a job and he's got to work hard at it. What did you think when you saw that the Browns were going back with McCown?
Well, there's a couple of thoughts there, Dan. I mean, they're with him every day. So I think it speaks volumes that they did that, because that means being with him every day, they really don't feel he's ready. Yeah. The flip side of that is the organization did trade up to draft him, and at some point you do have to put him out there. But as I said, they don't want to put him out there, so that tells you something, because, we all talk about this stuff. I watch the tape. Everybody else talks about it, but they clearly don't want to put him out there, so there's a reason for that.
Andrew Luck through the first two games, as opposed to what we saw last year when he was putting up nearly 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns. What's the big difference this year?
In many ways, I don't think there's a dramatic difference. I think that this is a team that does not have a really talented roster. I think by NFL standards, the offensive line would be considered below average. I think they run a deep drop pass game, which is a bad mix of a below average offensive line and deep drops. And I think that this can often be the result. The question is, does it fall apart a little bit? At some point, what happens is, if you can't protect and you're a deep drop team, is you have to keep more people in to protect, which is what they started to do, Dan. So you know what that does? It limits your eligible receivers. It reduces your pass game options. It makes it tougher to throw the ball.
Yeah, they're strangely assembled here. You go out, and they got a little bit older with Gore and Johnson. Your first-round draft pick is a wide receiver. And then you hear Chuck Pagano with those comments saying, hey, you know what? We've sort of... we put ourselves in this position, and Luck's got to handle the football a little bit. I thought Pagano was basically, he was being honest with us. And sometimes we don't like honesty, but that's what I took away from it.
No, I think when you look at the overall roster, and of course they've had so many injuries now in the secondary that they were playing with street free agents, but the roster itself is not a high-level NFL roster. They've been able to do what they've done because Luck is such a fine player, but at some point it's really hard to play behind a porous offensive line, particularly in pass protection, and there's no margin for error for this team.
What about the Eagles and that offense? I think they were saying that the Cowboys knew what they were going to be running. Has the NFL caught up with Chip Kelly here?
Well, I think there's as with most things, Dan, there's a lot of things to discuss here. To say that they knew the plays, I don't really know what that means. The Cowboys last year ran the ball really well, and they had about 3 running plays. So I don't, again, that's easy to say after the games. I think when you play speed tempo, and that's the way you want to play, and you snap the ball with 23 or 24 seconds, the volume of plays that you have in your playbook is much smaller. The faster you play, the less plays you can possibly have. So that's a factor for sure. The quarterback does not research the defense at the line of scrimmage. They just snap the ball. I think that, quite frankly, their O-line has not been very good at all. Now, there's larger issues at play, overview issues. When DeMarco Murray was in Dallas, he basically ran outside zone and what we call gap scheme runs, which he's a track runner. You put him on a track and he goes. If you're going to run inside zone, backs need to have more vision. And you could easily make the argument that Murray does not have great vision as a back.
He's Greg Cosell, executive producer, NFL Matchup. He's been there at NFL Films for 35 years now. What concerns, even with Cam Chancellor back with Seattle, do you have with that defense?
I don't have a lot of concerns, to be honest with you. I think they'll get back on track. I think a lot of their issues have been discipline issues. Chancellor will help that. I mean, week 1 against the Rams, obviously a team that knows them well in the same division. They had a lot of breakdowns in their foundational cover 3. I would expect those breakdowns to go away. So I don't really see this as a seasonal issue at all for the Seahawks.
Do you have enough sample size with the rookie quarterbacks, with Winston and Mariota?
I mean, not to define their career, but I think you can. I've been impressed with Mariota. I was actually more impressed with him in the loss than in the win because he had to stand in there against a difficult defense to play against, and I thought he showed really good pocket poise, command, composure, did not perceive pressure. Winston was much better week 2. I think his feet were a little more settled, although his feet are not his strength, and I'm anxious to see his development, but he can make throws. His touchdown pass was a beautiful throw. Ultimately his feet need to get quicker. The question is, can that happen?
It is interesting that we can learn more about somebody in defeat than we can in victory. And you're looking at Mariota of when everything's going well, you would expect somebody to play well. But when it's not, that's when I always like to see a guy after he got sacked or a hard hit. Now, what do you do after that? And you're noticing that with Mariota. That's interesting.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that game was a tough game for him, and I knew it would be going in. No knock on the Bucs D, but for the most part, Lovie Smith's defense do tend to be, you get predictable fronts and predictable coverages, and he doesn't really have the people to execute his defense at the level that he would like. So that's a slower, more predictable defense than what he faced in Cleveland. Cleveland, he faced, the Mike Pettin defense, which gives you a lot of different looks, a lot of different fronts, pressures, and it was tough for Mariota at times, but I thought he played much better in the second half.
The most talented roster in the NFL would be who? Not the best team, but the most talented roster.
Boy, that's a tough question for me, and I say that honestly because I don't think necessarily in those terms. So I don't know if I can give you an immediate answer to that. Sorry about that.
All right, well then
But I will tell you this: I think right now, totally different point. I think Ben Roethlisberger is playing as well as any quarterback in the NFL right now.
What's amazing is that, he obviously not getting faster. He's still great at extending a play, and he's got some, those new toys that he's got there, and now he gets Le'Veon Bell back. Looking at what you've seen with offenses so far, the most dangerous offense in the NFL is where?
I think the Steelers would be in the conversation, given that they've played without Bell and Martavis Bryant, and when they get those two guys back, I think that's going to be a really difficult offense to defend, the way Roethlisberger's throwing. And it's funny what you said about him. Last week he only made one play, and it was a big play, so I'm sure it was on all the highlight shows. He made one play outside the pocket. The first 2 weeks, for the most part, Dan, he has been a precision pocket player, and over the last 2-3 years, he's really evolved into that guy.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. And we were talking about this. Has the running game, is it coming back in the NFL?
I would say yes, and I'm not sure it truly went away. I mean, if you just look at a 2 or 3 year stretch, but in the long course of the NFL, I don't know if that indicates a big trend. I don't know if it truly went away. I think at some point in this league, you have to run the ball, and you have to run the ball with some frequency and some sustainability, and you need to do that. And I think backs. I don't know if backs were ever, in my mind, devalued. People use where they're drafted to indicate that, but I don't know if that necessarily means they're devalued by NFL coaches.
I'll let you go back to your projector there. Always great to talk to you, and thank you for your insights, Greg.
Dan, I appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, Greg Cosell, executive producer of NFL Matchup.